Welcome to the Wisconsin Music Podcast. Here to introduce you to the great musicians and music businesses and organizations of Wisconsin. Every week, Wisconsin Music Podcast will be bringing you great information on what's happening in the Wisconsin music world. For our music-loving listeners, we'll bring you music that you haven't even heard of yet from unique and talented artists and hear about their journey so far. You'll either hear live performances of their songs or songs from their selected discography. For our musicians out there wondering what they can do to further their recognition, we'll be calling upon Wisconsin music businesses and organizations to enlighten you on what they're doing to help further your music journey. And now, here's your host, Zach Fell.
Thanks, Dean. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Wisconsin Music Podcast, brought to you by Diamond Dave Photography, the photography that supports local music in Wisconsin. It is ready to work with your band or any solo artist on your next promo pictures or band show. To contact Diamond Dave and see previous work, check out Diamond Dave Photography on Facebook and Instagram. Wisconsin Music Podcast is also brought to you by ZTF Studio. ZTF Studio recording and mixing services, specializing in singles, demos, EPs, and LP projects for the last 20 years in southeastern Wisconsin, doing jazz, rock, funk, country, indie, and more. ZTF Studio brings success to your recording project. A few testimonies, one from Dimitri Wolf saying, "It sounds very clear. He's also one of the more professional mixing engineers I've had contact with. Very efficient and mixed vision driven." Well, that's it for advertisement. From folk rock to synth pop, Kat and the Hurricane can do just about everything. With their cutting lyrics and catchy hooks, Kat Farnsworth and Benjamin Coakley, along with drummer Alex Nelson, will make you sad in the best possible way. Their 2020 EP, Libra, is a departure from their debut, Miles Away, containing songs written with new eyes on the world but with the same heart. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 21. Welcome to Wisconsin Music Podcasts. We have Kat and the Hurricane here this week. Welcome to the show. So we have Alex, who plays drums, Benjamin, who sings and plays keys, and Kat, who sings and plays guitar.
That is correct.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
Why don't you give us your musical origin story? Doesn't matter who starts, but just kind of give us like your background and how music got you to where you are today.
Well, for Kat and the Hurricane, this is Kat. I decided to embark on this endeavor back in October of 2015. It was after the band that I had been in kind of came to a close, and I noticed that all my friends in that group were off kind of doing their own thing. So I thought it's my turn to also do a thing. So I created a Facebook page and kind of just built on from there. Started recording with my friend in his basement. That leads us all the way up until today, where we now have 2 albums on, Spotify and other places that you can listen to music. And I acquired 2 more band members that are the driving force behind the Hurricane.
Excellent. Alex, why don't you give us your musical origin story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been playing drums for about as long as I've had arms, which is like forever, I've come to find out. And I never really had an outlet. I focused on school and getting to where I am now in my career quite a bit and kept music and stuff to be a side gig. I had a couple bands along the way, mostly cover bands, but then one day, and this was probably around 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more at this point, I met Kat through a very, very close mutual friend of ours, and I knew about Kat and the Hurricane. One, I got to see them perform like at the Cactus Club in Milwaukee and Summerfest, and I noticed that they did not have a drummer, and I was very much, little did they know, vying for that spot. And yeah, Kat and I and Ben just started getting to know each other a little bit more, and I think it was probably Kat that popped the question and asked if I would play drums for Kat and the Hurricane, and I was like, I mean, I would, but I don't have a drum kit. I've been drumming for forever, but I've really never owned an acoustic drum kit to practice on, so I've always just been left to my own devices, making beats or doing percussion in different ways. So Kat was like, that's no problem. I can buy you a drum set. I can get you a used set at this place I work at. And I was like, oh my God. And Kat did. Like, Kat actually got, like, what was it, like a $50 kit or something like that? It was
$100.
$100. There we go. Amazing. And that's all that we needed. And I mean, the rest is really just history.
Excellent. Very cool. And Ben, or do you go by Benjamin?
Either one is fine.
Okay. So Ben, what's your music origin story?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of fill the gaps between those two stories. I have been playing music for most of my life. I come from a musical family. I took piano lessons as a kid. Always just loved playing keys, especially. When I was in college, I would play some acoustic guitar, do open mics, that sort of thing, but nothing that ever really stuck until I moved back to Wisconsin. I went to undergrad in Michigan, and so that's where I was for a while, but I moved back to Wisconsin, and I met Kat in Janesville. We were both living there at the time at an open mic, and we just happened to both play on the same day and realized that we had similar musical interests, and we just sort of started talking. And Kat did sort of the same thing to me as with Alex, where they're like, I want to turn this into a bigger project. And they had just been playing just the solo acoustic guitar type of thing, and was like, I want you to play keys with me. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll consider it. I really would love to do this. Let's practice and try it out. I've never really toured before. I don't have a touring bag. And then the next time Kat showed up with a touring bag for my keyboard. And so, it's hard to say no at that point. But that was 3 years ago, beginning of 2018. So for a while, Kat and I were just a duo, and we played with backing tracks for drums and stuff. And I would program stuff on my keyboard, and we would layer things that way until we met Alex and started to build more of the acoustic full band thing from there.
Wonderful. So Kai, seems like it was fate to happen.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys got together, started playing some gigs. So what year did you guys start playing as a 3-piece?
July of 2019, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we played
In a
that
barn.
one barn. Yeah, with the pizza on the farm thing. That was fun.
Yeah, we played in a barn. We had already been playing, so Kat and I started really gigging in the beginning of 2018. We played some shows in Janesville, just around southern Wisconsin. We played a couple gigs up in Madison at Boss Meadery and the Up North bars, some bars and stuff like that. So we had already been slowly building connections, and then when Alex came on board, just sort of continued. We were booking things, playing at least 2 to 4 shows a month at that point.
Great. Once you had to put together, what goals did you plan to make it successful? I mean, what was your practice schedule? Did you guys start doing covers, or was it just originals? And what did you do in social media to kind of help grow your fan base?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we've collectively, the three of us, we've done a really good job of covering all of our bases. So when we decided to go for it, we were gearing up to record this album, and I had already had this album written when I invited Benjamin in. So I was like, okay, here's the roadmap of this album. Let's do it together. And then when Alex came into the scene, we no longer had to worry about drum tracking, and doing pre-made beats. So really the goal was let's do an album. Let's do an album together. Let's see what happens. And then before we knew it, we were well on our way to booking tons of gigs around Madison, and also booking for a tour, our first ever tour altogether, that we had scheduled for March of last year. And unfortunately, after months and months of back and forth and emailing and really putting in the time of trying to get everything just right, we got 3 days into our first ever 10-day tour, and unfortunately had to turn around and come home. But in the grand scheme of things, we did it all together through teamwork, and we know that we can do it again. We're excited for what's to come. 2020 was really a year of kind of sitting down and seeing what we had to work with in the face of, this pandemic. From there, we buckled down and started recording more and started doing live streams and just adjusting to the circumstances as best we could.
Excellent. And so obviously in this day and age, social media, you're doing live streams. What else are you doing to help promote Kat and the Hurricane?
TikTok.
Okay.
trying to.
Trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, I think our philosophy has been since day one is just saying yes unless we have a really strong reason not to. And so that was our strategy at the beginning when we were booking shows. We played almost every show that was offered to us if we were free and able to do it. We played coffee shops, we played festivals, we played backing music at a restaurant, or like literally anything we could. And now we're a little bit more selective just because we have maybe more opportunities to choose from, and we can be more selective. But with social media now, that's sort of become our mantra as well, is just say yes. So we've sought out, doing podcasts and doing reviews. We've found just by like connecting with people on Instagram and Twitter is a big way, just finding other bands who are sort of in our genre of music and sort of doing the things that we're doing from other places and just connecting. And, you'd be amazed at how many things can come out of just like following someone on Instagram and saying hi, and they're like, ooh, I do this show, or like my friend's partner's mom runs this podcast or this music chart, and then we end up on a website that, brings more people in. So really just about seeking out those connections and saying yes to any way we can sort of meet new people virtually.
I think too, expanding our repertoire a little bit. I feel like with social media, that's a huge asset of so much of our work in the last 9-10 months now that we've been in COVID. But even before that, like we often joke, like we could probably hire someone to do this because it is such a task. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. There's a lot to be intentional with. And so I feel like we've been expanding into like videos. We have like music videos out. That's something that was pretty new. We had Over You out before pandemic, and then during pandemic we actually released another music video that was shot in a safe and social distanced way. And like just making little like videos to go like on our Instagram stories, or like Kat mentioned TikTok. It's very video centric, but like trying to figure out ways to have fun with it too. Like we just did this really silly thing. Just asked our Instagram followers like, hey, we're gonna play one of our songs, and we are gonna ask you what gender is our song, and we just made up like a bunch of really silly things, like what was it, Trans Mask and Ed Sheeran or something like that, or like Big Strong Sexy They Them Taylor Swift or something. It was like really silly. And so yeah, I think like really working on expanding our repertoire and figuring out what fits. I think in so many ways we've just been like building the plane as we've been flying it. Sorry to use a really old COVID metaphor at this point, but I feel like we've gotten so much success at just like experimenting and throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks.
I think that's a great plan. I think as long as you're trying to be creative and you're trying to expand what you're working on and people are drawn to it, you're just going to become more and more successful. So going on from there, let's talk about venues. Obviously, pre-COVID, you talked about doing open mic, coffee houses, festivals. What were some of like the red flags that you kind of experienced at some of these venues? They went, oh, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do something like this again because of such and such or this and that.
Go for it, Benjamin.
There's a lot of different categories of answers to that question that we have sort of figured out. And that's what it is, right? Is trial and error that eventually you learn, okay, maybe we won't do this again. The first one that comes to my mind, and maybe Kat and Alex will have other ones that they're thinking of too, but is thinking about travel distance. So like, especially at the beginning, we wanted to play outside of Janesville and even Madison and Milwaukee. We tried to get in those places, but we were really open to anything, driving down to Chicago or other places. And we quickly learned that just because a venue is in Chicago or in the Twin Cities or in a place we want to play at doesn't mean it's always worth it, whether financially or whatever, especially financially, right? Like if you're going to drive 5 hours and you have no idea if anyone's going to show up and if you're going to get paid anything, especially at the beginning, we weren't doing shows to make money. It's not like we were really making much of a profit. But in that case, it's like you're losing money because you're paying to drive for 5 hours, and in some cases, there's shows that were worth it and were still fun. And then there's others where it's like you drive a really long time. The show starts 2 hours late and like no one's really there for you. And so, it's just playing that game of like, is it worth our money and time, when we all have other jobs and other things to do. To take some of those shows. But yeah, if y'all have any other answers.
I think two things come to mind, but I want to share the mic if Kat has anything.
No, go for it, Alex.
So first thing, and it's really, really small, and I definitely think that we can be really, really flexible, and this definitely isn't like the biggest red flag or like a deal breaker, I mean, it might be something we approach with caution, maybe, but like, if a venue doesn't have anyone like at the door or expects you to bring someone to man the door, or I should say, human the door, to check the people's IDs and take money and things like that. If the gig doesn't come equipped with that, that means we are probably not going to be receiving money from people at the door and need to figure out a different way to do that. And so that's not necessarily something we always know ahead of time, but sometimes we have to do a last minute scramble and just remember it for the next time that we book. Like, oh gosh, if we book here again, we really need to bring an extra person or something. The other thing that really comes to mind for me in terms of red flags is something that's probably just a little bit more personal to Ben and Kat and I. And that's just that we are a queer band. We're a bunch of queer non-binary musicians, and so that means that safety becomes a much more important thing to consider than it might be for a musician who might not have these identities. Or it might be the same case for a musician that might not have these identities but has another identity where safety does become more of a concern. So for example, like I don't think this was any show that we've had to like turn down or have had a bad example with, at least since I've been in the band, but I have heard stories from Kat and Ben of like trying to navigate different venues that are giving off some homophobic or transphobic vibes, or even just saying or doing something that's like, that landed really weird or wrong with me. I don't know how I feel about this. Like, how would we feel, being performers in that space? How would we feel with their clientele? How would their clientele treat us? Things like that, some musicians might not have to consider, that we really, really do have to strongly consider, because, safety is just not something to mess with. So I would say that's a big one for us.
Do you have anything to add to that, Kat?
No, Alex and Ben put it perfectly. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Do you want to, obviously totally up to you, do you want to educate some of the listeners out there about that? Kind of how, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase the question.
Sure. Yeah.
To educate the listeners out there about what things that they might not even realize lands wrong to you, that maybe if you open their eyes to it, they would go, oh, well, then maybe I won't say that anymore, or I won't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, because that's a great question.
I'm waiting to see if Alex wants to answer, because Alex is the educator amongst us.
That is true. I professionally do a lot of educating. Gosh, Ben, really the only thing I can think of right now is just, asking pronouns before you introduce a trans artist without knowing how they want to be referred to. But yeah, what did you have anything else aside from that?
Yeah, I think that something that people don't think about, oftentimes just innocently, is the pronoun thing, or just like people who maybe haven't met or don't know a lot of trans or like LGBTQ plus people, like that, like Alex and I both use they, them pronouns, rather than being referred to as like he or she, and Kat is fine with all pronouns. And so like just when people tend to, when they see people, make assumptions about their gender based on how they look, and that's just a natural sort of human inclination. And so something that I try and encourage people to do is to separate that in your mind, that just because someone looks a certain way doesn't mean they necessarily want to be referred in the way that you maybe are assuming, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, just using blanket terms like girls or guys or whatever, just because at first glance that's the assumption that your brain makes. A lot of times in like LGBTQ spaces, there's a huge intentionality that's not always present in other spaces where people are more aware, just because if those are the people you're around, your brain has sort of learned to separate those two things. So that's the biggest one that I would say. And that's not always like a violence thing. Obviously, there's a difference between that and someone being like openly, actively like hateful, know? But that's just one of the ways I think people can start to shift the way that they think about language and make spaces feel safer.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, like, space is something to consider. And my suggestion requires like a literal building renovation, and I don't think that that's within anyone's like necessarily, I should say, within everyone's budget. But I just think of like when I'm trying to find a restroom, I don't like gendered restrooms personally, and every trans person is different, but I'm always on the lookout for an all-gender bathroom or a gender-neutral bathroom, so that's always helpful, but not required. But I think too, if I'm going to go into a gendered bathroom and it's got like I don't know, bows and frills and like a makeup station and like all these things, like a baby changing station in the women's restroom, and then the men's restroom is just a urinal and a magazine. Like I'm gonna, or like grungy butch, like car mechanic, whatever kind of stuff all over the walls. Like I'm gonna feel a specific way about your decorating choices a little bit. I mean, which isn't to say we can't have them present. We just might have to, switch, like mix and match a little bit. So, right. Anyway, it's just small things, really. But I do think that the biggest way to demonstrate, like, just at the very least, just like some intentionality or awareness is the pronoun thing. And I think that ultimately, I can forgive almost everything outside of violence. If someone's like, hey, by the way, what are your pronouns? It's like, okay, everything you just did like 10 minutes ago is completely erased. You're my favorite person now. So it can be just really small things. And of course, I'm just one person. My impacts, or the impact on me, is going to be different than another person too. So,
right.
Yeah. Thank you for asking, though.
I just wanted to make sure if you were comfortable talking about that. If not, obviously we just keep going. But if you wanted to talk about it, which we did, then, definitely I wanted you to be able to express how you feel about that.
So appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So that's I don't really have a good segue to go into something else after that, but let's talk about local scene attitude. So let's talk about the positives in your local scene. What great things for musicians have you seen happening in your town? What type of venues did you enjoy the most? Maybe if you want to name some, go right ahead. Because I know the Madison area has great live music venues. Hopefully they treated well. I know we talked about how you were treated earlier a little bit, but maybe talk a little bit more expansively on that. Just looking under this umbrella here. Yeah, and in your experience, what have you seen that makes you go, this is a great thing, and I want to do this again and again? So just the positives that are happening in the music scene of your local area.
Absolutely. I'll go first. As far back as 2014, I happened to play a show with my first band here in Madison at what was once called the Froth House. And I just so happened to meet our friend that we are still friends with to this day, Dana Perry. And honestly, meeting her was a huge step in the right direction of like shifting, specifically at that time, my attention towards the Madison music scene. Because I'm from southern Wisconsin, in a tiny little town where, it's not much is going on. So Madison is where, my eyes were at. And when I met Dana, I didn't think anything of it, but I had kept in contact with her over the years. And now, to this day, we are still working with her. We are doing live streams together. We have a show coming up on the 14th with her that she's hosting. And she is just she's a great example of how wonderful and welcoming and warm this community can be, because the friendship has been there for years and has always been so kind and considerate and always like, I feel like I'm one of the first people that she's got anything going on. She's like, yo, what's Kat and the Hurricane doing? It's just that kind of connection that we have. And, that's just one example for myself. I don't know if Ben and Alex have samples as well, but we've got really decent people here, people that really care about music and art and volunteering their time. And yeah, Alex, Ben, you guys got anything?
Yeah, I think something that you hinted at in that answer, Kat, was that it's really about the people, and out of the people come some really great venues. So there are a lot of really great venues, but they're great because the people come to shows, right? And they support other artists at those shows. And so like the Froth House doesn't exist anymore, or like the Frequency doesn't exist anymore. But a lot of the people who were going to shows, who were playing at those shows, are still around. And so even when a venue closes or is under new ownership or moves, like things always pick back up. So even when a venue closes or changes its name, like you always know that something's going to pop back up and it's not going to be gone forever, because there's people like Dana who have been making music in this city for years. And, there's so many other bands that I could name, but, and I think of one of our favorite venues to play at is Boss Meadery on East Washington downtown. And we know the owner, and she's really great. And it's a space that people come to listen to music, even if they don't know who's playing. It's the kind of place where people know that if they go to this show, it's going to be fun. Even if there's a band that they don't like, they know that the space is welcoming, and it's a place where people can come bring their own food. They sell mead that they make there. It's just a big open 1,000 room. And so having venues like that where you know that it's going to be fun, even if you don't make a lot of money and even if there's not like a huge turnout, you know that there's going to be other musicians there who are going to be waiting to make connections. And I think that's something that I really love about Madison.
Excellent.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of all of those, because I totally agree with everything that Kat and Ben said. Like, without the people, none of the amazing places that I call home musically and just as a music lover, attending shows, like those are my homes. Like, those are where I go. So, I always, whenever people ask me about music in Madison, I always come back to this stat, and I don't know how accurate it is anymore, but I once read when I first moved here 4 years ago that Madison, Wisconsin is the third best city in the entire United States for music, behind Nashville, Tennessee at number 1 and Austin, Texas at number 2. And that, having lived here for 4 years, like, at first that totally surprised me. I was like, what? How did I stumble upon this place that's apparently better than, like, Philadelphia or, like, Seattle, like, you know, like, all these places, like, Austin and Nashville, that makes sense. But anyway, like, it just makes so much sense now. There are so many incredible venues for, especially like thinking about like where we're at in our music trajectory. Like, we're getting to the spot where we have and we can open for touring musicians that are coming through on like bigger tours. And so we have incredible venues to support those, as well as like your garage band, local indie DIY, and folks like us as well. And along with that, I would just have to say that today actually is the 1 year, today when we're recording, which is February 1st, is the 1 year anniversary of our first show at our favorite, more touring scale venue of all time in Madison, which is the High Noon Saloon. That just continues to be one of mine and our collective like proudest achievements, and we just can't wait to play there again. Like, that's the best place. So it's just really cool to be in a community where like we can actively play shows among other bands like us and among folks that like bands like us, but we can also like really deeply enjoy music on every day off that we have, see shows all the time, and even like have our like host of options of like who to reach out to potentially open for like big touring shows and things like that.
Nice, very nice. Now let's flip the coin. What do you see as struggles in your local scene? What is suppressing or oppressing, you know, whatever buzzword you want to use? What do you think is suffocating basically the local music scene for you?
I mean, first goes without saying the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea how our venues are gonna all survive this. Like, I already know, like, the Art Inn already closed, for example. Like, I would hate to see, like, some of our other favorites, like Communication, or High Noon or Boss or anything like that, anything happen to them.
What about pre-COVID? What do you think was maybe suffocating the local music scene before the pandemic hit?
I think something in Madison that's actually a flip side of what we just said as a positive, which is that it's a really great knit community, tight-knit community. And I think sometimes with any tight-knit community, there can be a focus to become too in-group. I do think that's just like sociologically, like, you know, when you have a strong bond with your people, sometimes you focus too much on your people and not people that aren't part of your people. And so, you know, Kat and I experienced this too when we were still a duo and trying to play more shows in Madison, where it can kind of be hard to break into that community and hard to book if you don't know anyone already. Like, if you know, like for us now, we have tons of friends here, so it's super easy, like Alex said, to really like pitch an email and play anywhere, any night of the week. But if they don't know who you are or know who you know, that can be sometimes a downside where, especially if you're not from Madison, like when we were living in Janesville, which is only 45 minutes away, but if you're not sort of in the city and connected with people yet, it can be hard to break into. And I think because Madison has so many venues that are doing recurring events and have such an established presence, that I think there's less like open mics per capita. Like, there are open mics, but compared to like in Janesville, where there's only a couple music venues, but they all do open mics where like any 15-year-olds can get up and play. Whereas in Madison, it might be harder for someone who's just starting out to sort of get a platform. And I do think that's a disservice, because I think potentially we're missing out on people who are amazing musicians, but just don't have those connections yet.
Right.
So I do think that happens as well.
I would definitely echo that. I was also having a lot of trouble breaking into the music scene, or at least the scene of musicians. When I first moved here, like, I feel like I was all a part of the show scene, but like, I feel like the only avenue into that may have been half stack sessions, but that I didn't really participate in that. And half stack sessions, for those who don't know, is actually a really cool program for, I believe it's for any person who is not a man involved in music, like not a cisgender man involved in music. I could be wrong about that.
Okay.
But I agree. That's something I experienced as well.
Kat, do you have anything to add?
For me, I guess it's like the lack of representation sometimes. So the balance of like how many bands are like rock bands, 30, 40-year-old dudes that are rocking on the scene, and then we kind of compare like how many little bands like a little band of queers like us, like how many bands like that are on the grind and out there trying to do the same exact thing that these other rock bands are doing in terms of like, I guess, just the representation of it all in the fact that I guess you don't see as many bands like us. We're kind of, I don't know, I feel like they're coming out slowly but surely because of like the consumption of it. So I'm a queer person and I am in a queer band, so like I am always going to gravitate towards like trying to find other queer bands and artists to listen to because it I can relate to it. So that's what we are trying to do. We're trying to cultivate a music scene and a brand that more closely hits home for folks like us, for trans and non-binary kiddos out there that don't necessarily have that representation in their own home. So that really, it kind of, the less you see of it, the less you know about it. I guess the more easy it is for you to be unsure of it and or scared to consume it. So we just want to make our music like not trying to like cater, but trying to cater for kids like us at a younger age, whereas I didn't grow up listening to a lot of queer artists and such, and now that I am growing into my queerness and coming into my full person, I just see the avenues that have opened up, and I want to let kiddos like me know that they exist and that they can pursue those things and they can consume those things, and that there's also nothing wrong with that.
Excellent. Well said. That kind of takes me to one of my last questions would be, but I'd like to bring that up now because of what you're talking about. What artists are you listening to that fits within that circle?
All right, guys, you got the list ready? Let's go.
Who wants to go first?
I'll start with good old Tegan and Sarah.
Girl in Red.
So many. I'm trying to think of specific.
I think I may have taken yours, Ben.
Like Midwest bands even. There's a band called Gully Boys in Minneapolis that we love. There's an artist called Claude.
Supernova from Chicago.
She, Her, Hers. Partner
from Canada.
Pronoun, New York.
The Sonder Bombs is a really great band. Future Teens. It's a growing list, with each passing year more and more bands are popping up sort
Excellent.
of in that world.
Can't forget Phoebe Bridgers.
Oh, and Teddy Geiger.
Can't forget Teddy.
Excellent. Unfortunately, I don't know any of these bands, and I apologize. But are there any of these groups that you mentioned? Are they in like the top 50 Billboard, or is there groups out there in the top 50 or top 100 Billboards that also identify in this under this umbrella?
I want to say that Claude might be inching up there right now, but I don't know about mainstream Billboards. Definitely on like a bunch of indie radars, though.
Okay.
I can probably speak to that. Yeah, like there's a lot of people, like Lady Gaga, I think is one of the artists that really paved the way, like when she popped on the scene, 10 years ago now, as someone really representing the LGBTQ community. Nowadays, I think of people like Harry Styles, Troye Sivan. I'm trying to think of other examples.
Isn't Kesha queer?
Yeah, Kesha. Even like Demi Lovato is bisexual. There's a lot of people, we talk about this sometimes. Miley Cyrus, yeah.
Miley!
Like, not everyone necessarily makes it part of their brand, if you will. I don't like using that word necessarily. But, there are some folks like Lady Gaga, I think, where Lady Gaga makes her, maybe not so much anymore, but like her entire presence is about being subversive and about like sort of creating a place for the outcast. And then, someone like Demi Lovato is queer and has talked about that in her personal life, but it's not necessarily the brand of her music. And I think both are absolutely valid and, great. But yeah, I think there's a growing field of that first of the Lady Gagas, where people who are really making it like obvious that like we are LGBTQ. and want to be very open about it, just because, like Kat said, that provides a little bit more love and representation for kids.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's one band that the front singer, Brandy Carlisle. Have you ever heard of her?
Oh, love.
Yeah.
Me and my wife have been following her for probably since like 2006, 2007, before they really hit it big. And obviously the other more well-known artists definitely have great respect for them as well as artists and as people themselves. So like you said, it's starting to grow. I think it takes, unfortunately, our culture, our society to, I think you're opening our eyes, being, I guess, the buzzword is being more woke to people are just people. It doesn't matter, what happens in their personal lives. It's really none of your business.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk about current music. Your two current ones on Bandcamp is Out of My Mind and Sorry I'm Like This, which features all three of you. Is there any other ones on Bandcamp that features all three of you?
Everything from the Libra EP,
Okay.
Sorry That I'm Like This, and Out of My Mind has all three of us.
Okay. Let's talk about some of that. I would like to put some of your music on the podcast so people can hear it.
Sounds great. I would like to offer up Walls. Walls is a song about, like, this one cuts deep. It's about sexual violence and about the aftermath of it in terms of like living with it and living through it and existing on the other side. This one, it came about from trauma bonding in a car with a friend of mine. We shared stories, and before there was some miscommunication on our ends, and once we aired out those stories, like we kind of saw each other on a more intimate level. After we swapped stories, I went home, and then the next morning I wrote the song. So the song is basically, it was for that person, but now I see that the song is now more than just about that person. It's for anybody that's ever experienced anything traumatic like that. And it's really just a song for survivors, and basically just begging that no matter what happens, like, don't shut yourself off to the world. Try to continue to be soft and vulnerable, because that's the most powerful thing, even after you've been so hurt.
Came away from the wall that you have built, and I am climbing your fears to put them in the ground. Give into it. Give into into it, give in to me. I know it hurts, it's plain to see, but I hurt too, and I know you want to be safe in everything you do, and it's not fair. We had no choice, and they can't steal our goddamn voice. So say it loud and say it clear. Do not let them dictate your singing to you, 'cause I have walls built too, and I am hoping you'll see that you are just like me.
I liked the video for that one too. I thought it was very creative.
Thank you. That was really fun to put together. We actually planned and prepared for and executed the whole thing in, what, like 12 hours? 12 to 15 hours? I think it was 15 hours, under 15 hours, yeah.
Yeah, we had an entire concept for the music video that was a different concept where we were going to be playing different characters and doing costume changes in this whole thing. And we had a friend of ours, the videographer, and we had it all set up. And then, we were talking about it like the day before, and we're like, what if we did this other thing? And we all just realized like this would be so much simpler and so much more fun. And so we just like texted them and was like, this is what we're doing. And then we woke up in the morning at like 7 or 8, and the whole day we shot the video, and then it was done.
It turned out really good. I think from what you said that the song is about, I think the video helps the agenda of the song very well.
Thank you.
Do you want to put one or two more songs into the podcast?
Be down for it. What do y'all think?
I would say Out of My Mind, and maybe we could do Libra.
Ooh, I'm into that. That sounds great.
Why don't you give us the story behind Out of My Mind?
Alex, Ben, I'm going to let you guys take this one for these two songs. I unfortunately got to cut this short on my end because I am still technically at work. So I'll leave you guys to it. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate the time. And I hope more good discussion comes to follow.
Absolutely.
We can definitely take it, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, guys. Love you both. And thank you so much for having us. I really appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you, Kat. Diamond Dave Photography, the photography that supports local music in Wisconsin, and is ready to work with your band or any solo artist on your next promo pictures or band show. To contact Diamond Dave and see previous work, check out Diamond Dave Photography on Facebook and Instagram. Wisconsin Music Podcast is also brought to you by ZTF Studio. ZTF Studio recording and mixing services, specializing in singles, demos, EPs, and LP projects for the last 20 years in southeastern Wisconsin, doing jazz, rock, funk, country, indie, and more. ZTF Studio brings success to your recording project. All right, back to the interview.
All right, Alex, do you want to talk about one of the...
I could probably do Out of My Mind. I don't really know the whole story of it, but I can only imagine. So Out of My Mind is actually one of my favorite songs to play live, and it was really, really, really fun to put this together in the studio as well. So Out of My Mind is essentially this, like, I don't know, kind of like ode to having incredible anxiety. And it's kind of like, it starts out really like contemplative and moody and broody. And then it picks up into this like really frantic, dancey energy. And yeah, it's essentially just like lamenting like the whole having a brain and having mental health problems and just the kind of things that you would say to yourself in your head as you're having like an anxiety spell or a panic attack or something like that. I feel like it speaks to my soul. So I really appreciate the way that Kat wrote this song. It's so good. And another thing about this, in the studio, we actually had a friend of ours who has since started playing with us for live shows, or at least practicing with us for live shows. So their name's Isaac, and they play just ripping electric guitar. And so we're super, super lucky to have them on this track. It really brings it together, and I think adds to the dancey, frantic energy.
Anxiety won't let me be me, so I say the darndest things. Somehow I'm jumping gun, I don't blame them when they run, 'cause I'm a lot to handle. 'Cause I'm out of my mind, 'cause I'm out of my mind, 'cause I'm out of my mind. Anxiety won't let me be me, so I do the darndest things. And even though I try, I can't imagine why anyone wanna stay. 'Cause I'm out of my mind, 'cause I'm out of my mind.
Excellent. And then Kat said Libra as well. So what's the
Yes.
story behind that one?
Yeah, so Libra, which is the title track of our EP, Libra, the whole EP really is a story about loving someone who doesn't quite have the capacity to love you back in the way that you need. And so there's a lot of songs about heartbreak, but also in that particular way where you still love someone and you still care about someone, and trying to navigate those really complicated feelings. And a Libra is the title track and really captures that really well. The chorus is what a thing to do for someone who doesn't love you. And so it's really about putting all this energy into a relationship or friendship and not being able to get what you need back. And musically, and this is what I really love about creating music in the studio, is you can sort of make the music convey the emotion of the song. And so with that song, we really tried to make it floaty and moody and emotional, where it's sort of like reflective, a little bit angry and hurt, but still sort of having that tenderness to it. And Libra actually is the first song that Kat and I recorded together. And actually we self-recorded it and mixed it. And that was a long process because we had never done that before, neither of us. And so we really just played around to do bedroom recording. And we put out the first version of that in 2019. The version that's on the album now was remixed and remastered and updated a little bit. But yeah, so that song is, a long sort of reflective song, good to put on, when you're just sort of chilling in the bathtub or, sitting in your car. So it's a good one as well.
Put your name in the sky, pennies and papers and meaningless little things. You can only see it at night. You can only see it at night.
Excellent. Recording process with Matt. And
Yeah.
so who played bass? Because as a three-piece, it's keys, guitar, vocal, and drums, which is kind of like, if you remember of the band from the 60s, The Doors, they didn't have a bass player either. The keyboard player played all the bass parts with the left hand. Ben, are you playing bass parts with your left hand in live gigs? Or how are you guys taking care of that?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what happens. I've just really adapted to playing that way. I, for years, sort of just have adapted sort of an improv style of playing and filling in the gaps. And so, especially when it was just Kat and I playing, I was, trying to fill in the bass ends and also like doing the percussion when we had it using the keys. On the actual album, Kat played bass on most of the songs. I think I may have recorded for one or two. Kat is a better bass player than I am, though. Kat played bass in the band that they were in before Kat and the Hurricane.
Okay.
And I think there was maybe one song that I did, but in the studio, I think Kat usually records.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we actually have had two different people play bass with us when we do live gigs. Sometimes we don't have anyone play bass at all, and that's just fine because it's just the three of us anyway. But we've had a couple friends of ours, Claire and Aaron, fill in here and there, and they're just incredible. Just the most talented humans I've ever seen.
Excellent. So let's kind of talk about the recording process now. Mindset, writing before or during the recording process. Just kind of give us an overview of your process from beginning to end.
Totally, yeah. So usually when we go to record, or at least times that we've been recording as a three-piece together, usually what would happen is that Kat and I would go in first and record just a scratch track, your drums, your vocals, your acoustic guitar, and we haven't actually taken a song in that we weren't certain at least about those parts. So everything that we've ever taken into the studio has had at least those fundamental basic parts completely finalized. In most cases, I know there was one song, Ben, that we took into the studio where we didn't have your keys really figured out yet. Maybe there was one more song, but I know that at least for one we did. And so yeah, we start there and then we just layer. We layer from there, and along the way, adjusting any kind of percussive things that we might be needing. Usually it's just a lot of layering of vocals, guitar, keys, synth, and then a bunch of auxiliary stuff. We've used like an EBO before, lots of auxiliary percussion, shakers, tambourines, rain sticks. They weren't actually timpanis, but we used like our biggest bass drums and took off one side to create like kind of a timpani feel for our song Walls. Usually, yeah, that's about it. And then in between mixes, like we'll work with Matt and he'll tweak the mix just a little bit this way or that way, or just arrange things not in huge structural ways, but just little tiny bits and pieces here and there. And usually like through a feedback process of here's a mix, what do you think? Here's what we think. Back and forth, we usually come to a really good solid final product. Sometimes it does involve additional trips to the studio, but it's right down the street from us. We're really, really lucky in that way. So, and Matt's usually really, really flexible. Matt's got a great ear for things. Sometimes too, we'll invite some of our friends to add in, like we've got a friend who's doing violin on a track that's being mixed right now, for example, just to add in a little bit of flair. We had a friend do saxophone and I think it was like alto flute or something like that for our track Walls. And so those little pieces kind of come together along the way until we feel like it's ready to be mastered. Anything you'd add on to that, Ben?
No, I think that's pretty much the process. I think, to use an anecdote for that, Redline is one of my favorite songs to look at the evolution of, because like Alex said, all the songs that we've brought into the studio so far are songs that we've already been playing live for a while before we actually have sort of stepped into the studio. So Redline is a song that we'd been playing live for a while, and it started out a very different version. It started out much slower, and then we sort of sped it up a lot, and then we slowed it down a little bit, and like every few months we sort of tweaked it and added different things. And then even when we got into the studio, we recorded everything that we had been playing live for, and we're like, something is missing, and we ended up adding some like vocal repeats that you can hear sort of throughout the entire song, and different vocal things that we had never done before, and now I can't imagine the song without it. But really just like playing what we play live, setting that down, and then being able to listen to it with an objective ear and be like, what can we add that we've maybe never tried before? And then usually it is a lot of just like shouting or like other vocal parts, like Alex said, auxiliary percussion stuff. And those are usually what really just takes it over the edge, where you listen and you're like, okay, yeah, that's it. And Matt is really good at hearing those things as well. And so it's fun being in the studio.
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest difference between the Libra tracks as we had played them, outside of, some of the structural things that were added to Redline, and the album version, honestly, I think are just atmospheric stuff that we would have never been able to bring to the song had we not, as Ben said, like just tracked it, listened to it, and layered on top of it.
Excellent. So is it co-producing with Matt, or were you guys pretty much producing it yourselves?
It's like kind of co-producing a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a back and forth. But it is sort of a weird situation, because when we came, we sort of already had the final, especially with the Libra, we sort of already had like the track list and everything planned out. And because we had tried, that's story for another day, but there was sort of a long story of trying to get that album recorded for a while. And before we met Matt, and then when we met Matt and we went into the studio for the first time, we're like, okay, this is the place where we want to do this. So we had already sort of had everything really mapped out in that case. But some of the newer stuff, as we've been working, there's been a lot more back and forth and a lot more sort of co-producing on some of the sounds that we're creating.
Wonderful. I think that's all really questions I have. We're running out of time. Like I said, the last couple questions were like, what's on your playlist right now? What artists are you listening to that you feel deserve recognition that are not getting enough recognition? But we kind of talked about that earlier. There's another question I asked is about work-life balance. How are you balancing your music life with your work life? I don't know how much experience you have with that, because you guys look like you're probably in your early 20s. So I don't know if you have a lot of challenges with balancing work with your musical life.
I mean, that's definitely something that at least I feel like I could comment on if you'd like me to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so I work for UW Madison, actually, and so I'm really, really, really thankful. The type of work that I do is like I do sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, sexual harassment, prevention, education. So a lot of the stuff that I do is very much in the background. I supervise a team of peer educators that do a lot of the educating on behalf of us, work for us. So I do have like a 40-hour week office gig, but I'm so lucky that it's so flexible, because like I took off a ton of time to go on our Libra tour in March, right before COVID hit, or right when COVID hit, I should say. And I had already taken off work. We had planned or started planning another summer tour at that time that never could happen, right? And everyone that I work for is just like, yeah, please, we'll come to a show if you are in the area. I was like, great, awesome, cool. But otherwise, we're pretty lucky that our schedules are really complementary, that we can really work around our schedules, and that for the most part, even when we have gigs, that I feel like it's not like we live in Chicago where folks are hitting the stage at 1 a.m. and the bar closes at 3,
Right.
Thankfully, I think we all have kind of approach shows and gigs in a way where, okay, you all have to probably wake up in the morning, right? And so I think we're just really, really grateful for that being the case. So yeah, really well, actually.
Excellent. Ben, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say it hasn't been a huge struggle in terms of balance for most of us, because, I also have a very flexible job where, I do work a full-time job, but I am able to take time off, and we don't play out of Madison a ton. That's a huge benefit too of living in a place like Madison, is we can play a lot of shows and they're right down the street, and especially we all live pretty close inside the city. And so it doesn't take a lot out of our night or our week, even to play a Wednesday night show, versus if we were driving. And that was actually much more of a struggle when Kat and I were gigging and we weren't in Madison yet. I was living in Janesville. Kat was living in Janesville for a while, and then lived in Chicago for a stint. And so we were doing a lot of driving, and that's much more difficult, obviously. So now we feel really, really lucky, because we have a great gig being in Madison, which is a city with a lot of opportunity. And, we have one practice a week. And then on top of that, there's all of the other things it takes to be a band and to grow your platform, which we found takes even more time than practice, doing all the social media stuff, sending emails, booking gigs. There's a lot of administrative stuff that goes behind the scenes. And we are able to sort of do that throughout our weeks as well. And it's nice that there's 3 of us that are all sort of full-time engaged in the band, because we can also sort of delegate some of those things. But
excellent. Well, thank you so much, Alex and Ben, and of course, Kat, for being on the Wisconsin Music Podcast. It was a great conversation. I'm so glad I got to meet you 3 and look forward to talking with you guys again in the future.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, that was another fantastic interview with Kat and the Hurricane. Thank you so much, Kat, Alex, and Ben, for being on the show. And thank you all out there for listening. If you're interested, there is a donation button on the website. Donations help with getting the name out there and having great guests just like Kat and the Hurricane. Or go to buymeacoffee.com/Wisconsin Music Podcast. I'd like to thank Nate Wyckoff for creating the music for the Wisconsin Music Podcast, and to Dean Bundy for our great voiceover in the beginning and intro. Thanks to Jacob at CW Hip Hop for syndicating our podcast every Monday at 4 p.m. at cwhiphop.com. Also, ZTF Studio recording and mixing services, specializing in singles, demos, EPs, and LP projects for the last 20 years in southeastern Wisconsin, doing jazz, rock, funk, country, indie, and more. You can contact ZTF Studio at www.ztfstudio.com or ztfstudio@gmail.com. And here's Kat and the Hurricane playing us out.
Sorry That I'm Like This is one of my favorite songs that we've put out there. We released it in last November, but it's a song that we've been playing live for a little while. It was one of the first songs that Kat and I co-wrote a lot of it together, and we both sing on it. We each have verses that we sing, and it's a kind of a fun song where we're both telling these stories about first dates and awkward dates, and sort of a thing that I think that a lot of our friends can relate to, which is just like, apologizing. Sorry that I'm like this, when you're like awkward in first meeting someone. And we, at the time that we wrote it, we're both having some of those experiences in our dating lives. And so we're like, here's this song. And it was one of our first songs too that we had that really felt like a song we can jump up and down to at our live shows. A lot of the songs on Libra are, very emotional, a lot of ballads. And so we're like, we need a song that we can dance to. And so that's what Sorry That I'm Like This became. It's a just really fun, catchy song intentionally. And it's really, really fun to play at shows. So yeah, that's a song that we are really proud of.